Hello, good evening everybody. Hopefully this time when I click it over, we're not going to freeze. Yay! Hello, good evening everybody. Okay, so to try and avoid any technical difficulties like we had when we did, what was the last one that we did? The fabric tumbler. I've decided not to use my face cam tonight because when I was trying to do my setup tonight, it kept freezing. So I did not trust it. Otherwise, hello, welcome everybody to our very first beginner's guide tutorial. We are doing a series over the holidays for all of the newbies that we've had come in the past couple of weeks and those that we are expecting to join us after the holiday season is in full swing as well, because lots of people are getting Christmas presents. So, hello, good evening. We are doing the beginner's guide to glittering tumblers tonight. Now, I do have a few of them going just so that I could show you everything in one tutorial. So we're going to start with this one. It isn't complete stainless steel, but I'm going to epoxy over the whole of this anyway, so it doesn't matter what the design underneath is. We're going to start with sanding and prepping tonight. From there, I'm going to show you how to glitter your tumbler using both the Mod Podge method and the hang method for epoxy. They are my two preferred methods. They are also the two most popular methods, and I will also be verbally covering the spray adhesive and the spray paint method as well, but because it uses aerosol cans, I can't actually, I'm going to move that up a little bit. I can't actually show you that from my craft room. That's an outside job. So I will be covering them in discussion, but I won't actually be showing you them tonight. We're also going to do, I've done a chunky mix on a glass, so we're going to finish off with the final coat with that as well, and hopefully all of that together will be a good enough guide for you to be able to glitter your very first tumbler. Now, we are very aware, because we've all been there ourselves, diving in and doing your first one is possibly the scariest bit. Once you get past that, and you will make mistakes along the way, the more you practice, the more that you improve. But definitely for me personally, when I first started, I was making a lot of, looking back now, what were beginners' mistakes. So I'm hoping that by showing you how I've, I don't want to say perfected my method because nobody's perfect, but how I've generated my way of doing things and the tips and tricks that I've picked a lot up along the way will hopefully eliminate a lot of those beginner mistakes for you as well. I'm just going to quickly check comments because I do have them up tonight. So hello to everybody jumping on. Hello. We're going to get started. Okay, so you start with your tumbler or your glass. Now, if you are using a glass, it was really hard to get off. You don't need to sand. What you still need to do though is give it a good wash with some soapy water and let it air dry completely. But if you're using a stainless steel tumbler, I like to give mine a really good sand. I think this is 220 wet and dry, but I'm down to my last little piece. So when I go to Bunnings tomorrow, I'm going to have a look on the back to try and find this code, and I will get back to you guys. But I am 95% sure that it's 220 grit. It is wet and dry because I do use it wet for some other things, but for when I'm doing this, I just use it dry. And you want to make sure that you're really roughing up that surface, because the rougher you make it, the more you've got for your, if you're doing the hang method, something for the epoxy to stick to. If you're doing the Mod Podge method, something for the Mod Podge to stick to. Right? So because nobody's going to see this, I give it a really good beating. See, you can actually see that in there now. And then what I would do from here, which obviously I can't do on camera, is take it out to my kitchen, give it a really good wash with some soapy water, and then let that dry before I move on to the next step. So your first step is do prep your tumblers. One newbie mistake that I was making, because sanding and not sanding, you'll find it really is personal preference, and there can be some very heated debates in crafting communities in regards to doing that. Me personally, the first few that I ever made, I did not sand, and when those got inevitably dropped, because my children are my children, I had whole pieces that broke off. Since sanding, for me personally, even when my kids have dropped them, I've had a couple of minor like hairline fracture cracks in my epoxy, but I've never had the same problem where whole pieces came off the tumbler. So now I sand religiously, but once you've sanded and you've washed your cup and it's all ready, if you want to, you can spray paint. Now I personally base spray everything that I'm not using a metallic glitter on. If you're using metallic glitter, you don't need a base coat. Anything else I do. So this is when I would go out and spray paint. Rule of thumb, go either black or white when you're first starting out, especially if you're limited on supplies. And then as you get more experienced and your collection of supplies starts to grow, that's when you can start adding more colored spray paints into the mix. So I have gone ahead tonight and already spray painted. Can't see the video. Have I lagged? Have I? Am I lagging? Can anybody confirm if I'm lagging? Otherwise, Gwendolyn, you might need to go out and come back in. Like close your app down completely and then come back in. Why are people against sanding? Monique, I'm not sure. A lot of people swear by the fact that they've never sanded and their work is just fine. The other half of the people swear that their work is perfect because they sand. It's just there's a lot of topics in regards to tumbler making that people do have very strong opinions about. The only advice that I can give you is try not to engage. You'll end up getting very flustered and very confused. Try it without sanding, try it with sanding, see what works best for you. Same as with what brands of epoxy to use, right? You need to keep, if you buy one and you get lucky the first time and you really love it, good for you. If you buy a brand of epoxy and it doesn't really work for you or you have a lot of problems, just keep trying until you do find a brand that works for you. But there are a few topics in the tumbler community that can get rather heated debates in regards to them, and sanding versus non-sanding is definitely one. So I just want to put the disclaimer in there that that is my personal preference and why I do that, but at the end of the day it's really up to you. Okay, so we're going to start with the Mod Podge method, only because when I do the hang method I'm going to make up enough epoxy to be able to do the hang method and then our final coat on our glass after that. So going back to spray painting, I have spray painted this one. I can't remember the color. It's a Rust-Oleum 2 times. When I edit this for YouTube, I will put everything in the description, including the sandpaper grit that I used as well. But I've painted this a really pretty blue color. This bit here, I want to do something, but I haven't decided what I want to do yet. But we're going to use Mod Podge over the rest of it to use this new Hyam's Beach from Sparkles by Carbee that came in the Summer Bonanza box. So I'm going to use that tonight. Hi Anna! What grain would you recommend sanding? Meredith, this is the only little piece that I have left because I need more, but I'm going to Bunnings tomorrow. I'm going to look up what that is, but this is the one that I use. I'm pretty sure it's 220 grit wet and dry, but I will confirm that tomorrow when I go to Bunnings and get more, because I had that tiny little piece that I've been using for the past week. Okay, so Mod Podge. The Mod Podge, actually I'm going to close that up so that I don't get Mod Podge all over. I'm really pedantic about my glitter. I don't have dump mixes. Well, very rarely do I have a dump mix. If I'm doing like a glitter swirl or something, it's a bit unavoidable. But otherwise you'll always see me with my little drop sheet because I try to save all of my glitter. So I'm using the dishwasher safe Mod Podge at the moment. In my experience, this one or the orange one, which is the gloss one, those are the two that work best for me. So make sure you use a nice, I mean this is a bit old now because I've used it a fair bit, but try and find a nice wide not scratchy brush. Like you want it to be nice and smooth, because if you have like a really cheap scratchy paintbrush, it can cause problems with streak lines. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this quite liberally to my tumbler. bits in there that I want to get out. And because we're working in summer, winters it's not such a big problem. But you do want to work a little bit faster. If you're not confident working fast, because you don't want the Mod Podge to dry, if you're not confident in working fast, do the cup in thirds. So apply Mod Podge to a third of your cup and then glitter it, and then work your way around doing it that way. And you shouldn't have any problems. But I'm just going to work quickly tonight. We did have a pre-live questions thread going. The only real question that I can answer that was asked that I haven't answered already, because it was like about time zones and stuff, is how long have I been making tumblers? It feels a lot longer, but it's only been a couple of years. I made my first wine glass for my 30th birthday in early October of 2018. By Christmas of 2018, I had my turners set up and I was waiting on my first shipment of epoxy. And the week between Christmas and the new year of 2019 was when I started experimenting and testing cups on a turner with resin. So we're coming up to, well, it's been over 2 years that I've been doing glasses and stuff, but resin tumblers on a turner, we're coming up to 2 years just after Christmas. So I'm not a veteran. There are a lot of people that have been doing a lot longer, but I'm definitely not, I wouldn't consider myself a newbie either. Does anybody, I do have comments up on my screen tonight. I figured out how to get it all up so that I can watch what I'm doing and watch you guys at the same time. So if you have any questions, let me know. What is the handle thing on the cup? Are you talking about here? Yvonne? Was that Yvonne? Okay, so this is what attaches, if you see it's got the thread in there. This is what attaches to, try and pull it in frame, your turner, right? So you'll see that at the end, inside here is a 12-ounce wine attachment from Chelsea Blue Designs. So that works the same way as if you were using a pool noodle or a football, if you can ever find footballs. So once you have all of your Mod Podge on, as you can see, I've put it on quite thick, nice even strokes. There are a couple of little lumpy bits, but we're using this one tonight. When we do the hang method, we're going to use a fine glitter as well. I just thought I'd cover all sizes, just in case you wanted to jump right in the deep end and use a chunky or a custom mix the first time you did it. But we're going to start from the bottom. We're just going to drop our glitter all the way around like that. And I always start at the bottom because then it reminds me to quickly do the butt. See that? Isn't that pretty? Okay, so now I'm just going to work in lines. Now if you don't want to work off an arm, I just find it easier to work off these because I can manipulate and turn. You can have your hand up inside there as well, if you need a little bit more control the first couple of times that you do it. So I'm just dumping it on wherever there's Mod Podge because we're going to go back in a minute and push it all down flat anyway. And my shaker's empty. So this never goes very well for me when I'm doing it live. I always spill it everywhere. Oh no. Let's see how we go. We ran out of glitter, so we're just having an intermission so I can put it all back in the shaker. I'm trying to read comments at the same time. Okay. Okay, now we can finish. Right, and that's all dumped on like that. Okay. While we're on, before we go any further, while we're on the topic of turner arms, right? Depending on where you buy your turner, like your pre-made turner or your turner kit from, you may or may not get turner arms included with your purchase, or if you're making it from scratch, you obviously won't. To get these, and these are pretty like the standard size for all of the turner kits and pre-made turners currently available in Australia, this is 3/4 PVC pipe. This is I can never remember if they're male or females, but the end with the threading goes onto your turner arm, right? This is called a turner arm. And then the turner kit, hang on, I'll fold this over. The turner or the turner kit that you get will have this piece on it. And this is what this piece here screws onto, which you'll see at the end. Now, once you get up and running and you've got a few cups going at the same time, it's really handy to buy a bunch of these attachments and a couple of PVC rods, cut them down to various sizes so that you can have them ready to go. And then you just buy, well, when you're first starting, you can either get your turner attachments, which look like this. This is a 12-ounce one. You can get these from Chelsea Blue Designs. Otherwise, you just buy a pool noodle, right? And you put your PVC pipe inside the hole in the pool noodle. But that is our glittered cup. You can see, where was it? See, here was like that bit there dried before we could get glitter onto it. That seems to be the only spot. So I'm going to go back with just the tiniest little bit of Mod Podge, and very gently, I don't want to swipe the brush like we did in the first application. We just want to very gently dab. Was that the right spot? Yes, it was. Okay, good. We just want to dab the end of the brush on there like that, because that's not going to mess up any of your other glitter work that you've just done. And same deal again over the top. Okay, so from here I'm going to give it a good little bash just to drop off any excess. Now, if you were using a fine glitter, from here you'd let the Mod Podge dry completely, and then you would seal it before epoxying. Now, whether you want to seal it by putting another coat of Mod Podge over the top, or whether you want to use a clear spray like Rust-Oleum 2 times, that's entirely up to you. But you do need to spray seal once the Mod Podge is dry before doing your first coat of epoxy. Because this is a chunkier mix, I don't want all of the little bits sticking up and being really rough, because it makes it really hard when you do your first coat of epoxy. It's going to be all bumpy and gross, and you're going to have to sand it right back. Thank you, Joanne. So what we're going to do is very lightly, you're not pressing and smushing, you're just lightly patting it all down. Now, there is a trick with baking paper that you can do, but I think if you're just starting out, this, just to save confusion and frustration, this is the most straightforward way of doing it, is just running your finger very lightly up and down the cup and pushing down any little bits that you can feel sticking up. It doesn't always 100% prevent the need for sanding. Chunky glitter is definitely something like I said, you're jumping in the deep end a little bit if your very first tumbler ever you're using a mix that has these big chunky 2.5mm pieces in it. They can be a little bit frustrating to work with, but patting down like I'm doing now definitely eliminates a lot of work, if not all, in the sanding department once your first coat goes on. So now you'll see if I spin that around, because I've patted it all down, I'm going to get a little bit of excess falling off like that. But there is the Mod Podge method. Now there are a couple of bald spots that I can see here and there where it doesn't have any of the finer glitter in it. It's just got chunky spots, which is why it's always beneficial to spray paint your base either black or white, or a close color to your glitter, because then it hides any tiny little bits or spaces that's between the glitter. So now I'm going to wait for this to dry completely. I will peel off my tape and do what I want to do in the middle here, and then I'll spray seal it completely and it will be ready for epoxy. Does anybody have, where did I get my turner from? Gwendolyn, my new turner, I've just got a couple of kits from Chelsea Blue Designs. I actually put a video up the other day of me trying to put them together. It's quite funny. I ended up putting one of the pieces on back to front. But I got my turner kit from Chelsea Blue Designs, and then I got my motor from Bunnings. If you wanted a turner that was already made, check out DJ and Raw Custom Turners. They make turners that you don't need to put together yourself. Like, they come already assembled and ready to use. So two companies are Chelsea Blue Designs or DJ and Raw are my two recommendations. I've used both of them personally. So yeah, check them out. Especially, I mean, if you watch the video where I made the turner kit, you'll see the ones that I made originally. When I first started doing cups, we didn't have the luxury of having turners and turner kits and stuff available. We had to go old school. So I've recently upgraded all of my old turners to these new ones. Does anybody have any questions on Mod Podge before we move on to epoxy? Because I just need, there's the Mod Podge. I just need a minute to mix up the epoxy itself. So while you have my attention, how much glitter did you use out of that shaker roughly? This is a 1.5 ounce shaker. It was about 2/3 of the way full tonight. This is a 25 ounce football, so it is quite large. You'd only need half the glitter that I used tonight on something small like a wine glass or a 12 ounce wine tumbler. So the tumbler I used tonight was quite large. But once it all goes back into the container, I still have quite a fair bit. I reckon maybe it was about there. So maybe about that much out of the shaker. Doing the hang method definitely uses less epoxy. I'm using AX74 tonight, guys. And I'm going to make up 20 mils. Because we're going to do the final coat on a glass as well, just to show you what happens once everything's cured and you're ready to do your first coat of epoxy. But otherwise, when you're doing the hang method, you only need the tiniest little bit of epoxy. Hang on 1 second. Joanne, technically yes, it's dishwasher safe. Mod Podge, this is what I started before I got into epoxy. This is what I used to do all of my glassware on. Now the catch for this is once it's dry, it takes 28 days for it to be fully cured to make it safe for like dishwasher and hand washing. So yes, it's dishwasher safe Mod Podge, but in the scheme of things, unless you want to be waiting a whole month for your creations to be ready for the customer, epoxy's definitely a lot quicker. Oh yes, back to the hang method. You only need the tiniest little bit of epoxy. Now when I'm working with resin, if I know that I have stuff that needs to be glittered, I try to have that ready and lined up to work on around the same time that I'm doing any final coats or anything like that, because I usually do whatever I need to do with the cups on the turners, and the little bit that's always left in the bottom of the mixing container is what I use for my hang method. If you are mixing up epoxy just for the hang method, if you have the measuring cups like I have, the 30ml ones, the smallest amount that you can mix up at any time is 5ml, which is 2.5 of part A and 2.5 of part B, and even then you're gonna have a lot left over. Like, it uses maybe 1 or 2 mils for a hang method. So I would highly recommend, once you get up and running and you have a few projects going at the same time, keep your hang methods for anything that's left over in the container from other projects. Okay, now EX74 is a double mix, so now that that's mixed into here, I have to put it into a second container and mix it for another couple of minutes, which will give me time to go over resin safety. Yay! Now, in my lives, you will never see me wear my half mask respirator. I do have a half face respirator. It's one that I got a while ago from Bunnings. It's, what brand is it? It doesn't say. I think it's 3M by the colors, but it's green, black and yellow, and it has like the interchangeable filters on both sides. If you're working with resin long term or for long periods at a time, you do need a half face respirator, and you also need safety goggles, which I never wear, admittedly, because I wear glasses and I don't like wearing contacts. So glasses and a half face respirator. You will also need I'm going to wipe that out so I can use that water, because I'm down to my last couple of measuring cups and I'm waiting on my water. You will also need, non-negotiable, a pair of gloves, which I'm about to put on right now. So, work, dropping everything, safety goggles, half face respirator, and gloves. Okay. Should dry before. Yes, I do, Gwendolyn. I wait until my Mod Podge is completely dry, and then I peel off my tape. If it needs any fixing up around the lines, then I do what I did where I showed you where I did that edge that didn't have any glitter, and I just go in and dab very lightly with the Mod Podge, re-glitter, press it down, let that dry completely, and then my lines are all nice and clean again. But that's if you're doing like the V design, or you've taped, if you're doing a glass and you've taped up around the top of the glass. So I'm just going to quickly do this again. So I'm just going to go through comments. Dorothy, if you use Mod Podge on a glass, how many coats of glitter do you need? Also, do you spray seal at the end? It really depends, Dorothy, on the kind of glitter that you are using. A fine glitter, you tend to need 2 or 3 coats of glitter. Chunky mixes, you can sometimes get away with 1 or 2. And then you have really weird, hang on, I'll show you. I'm making teacher's gifts at the moment. And this is Grape Teeny from Glitter Your World. Now, at certain angles, I can see straight through the glass. but as a whole, now, this is glittered on the inside, by the way, guys, because I'm making pen holders. But I can see, like, there's angles where you can see through the glass, and then, but as a whole, you don't. Does that make, like, it makes no sense to me. So there are some glitters where you can get away with just the one coat. But yeah, generally speaking, chunky mixes like this on a glass, you'll need a couple of coats. Fine glitters like this one. Do you remember our watermelon? Right, Christmas, guys. That was our watermelon that we did. But this has 2 coats on it, and it's still, like, you can still see the seeds. So fine glitters do take a couple more coats. Who sells EX74? Aldex sells it. LBB Resin sells it. I think they're the only 2 that do stock it. But EX74 has been particularly hard to get a hold of this year. If you search the group for types of resin, there have been quite a few posts where people have put up what they use. Me personally, I used to use Amazing Clear Cast. I now use Art Resin and EX74 for different projects and different things. And I do, because I can't get any more EX74, I do have some, is it Diamond Coat? What's the just resin? I have some of that on the way anyway. Okay, so we're going to, and please excuse, try that again. We're going to try that sentence again. Please excuse my spray paint job on this drink bottle. I did have something else planned for you all this evening, but I dropped it and I stuffed it. So I very quickly spray painted it, and as you can see, it is a shocking job. It's not the best I've done, and I'm not sure if it's all completely dry, but we're gonna have a go. Okay, so over this tonight I am using Tambourine. It's just an opal glitter. I'm hoping to create the like still get the purple to come up through it, but have it more of an opal purple, and then I'm thinking of doing a deep purple up here. But we'll see how we go with this spray paint job, because I may just end up stripping it and starting again. So the hang method, you want the tiniest little bit of epoxy, so one little line of epoxy. I'm now going to, and this is where we'll see if the spray paint's dry or not, work that firstly around the top of, well, this is a bottle, but my tumbler, right, so that I have a line the whole way around the top. Now you're going to be able to feel where there is epoxy and where there's not. Where there is already epoxy, your hand's going to glide nicely. Where there's not, there's going to be a little bit of resistance. I'm just not going to press so hard anymore because it's all on there. I will wait for everybody to jump back on. I'm so sorry, guys. Lives for me don't usually go according to plan at the best of times. If you've seen on my YouTube channel, I've actually called my my re-uploads for the live and unpolished. I think I've had maybe 2 lives in the history that I've been doing. I've been going live for, I think it was May 2019 I first started. So in all that time, there's always something that goes wrong. If I'm pre-recording, I don't have as shocking luck. It seems just because it's live. So, we're back. I've now dropped what I wanted to be a nice purple bottle into the blue mix, and we've got little blue specks on it as well. So this is going to end up getting stripped. But we're going to continue for the sake of demo. So, the hang method. You want to, obviously not do what I just did, but you want to push your epoxy, right? You push it around and then down. and then around, and then down. And it's the same way as if you were doing a glass or a wine tumbler or a skinny or anything like that. You always go around the rim and then push down to the bottom. Now, once you stop feeling, and you will, when you do this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Once you've got epoxy on there, it glides. Any spots that don't have epoxy, you will feel the resistance as you coat that part of epoxy. And then the more that you work the epoxy around the cup or the glass or the bottle, you'll start to feel that nice gliding feeling the whole way around. Once you get to that point, you want to start pushing it down and over your base until your base is completely covered. And then you want to go back the other way just to make sure you didn't pull it all away from the top, and go from the bottom, I'm trying to keep it in frame so you can see, across the bottom and back up to the rim of your cup. Right, this is going to ensure nice even coverage the whole way around so that you don't end up with any bald spots. So once that is on, we're going to be using Tambourine, and you do it exactly the same way as you would with Mod Podge. Let's see if we can get everybody in frame. Okay. Do the butt. Isn't that pretty? Maybe I won't have to strip it. Maybe this will be enough to cover. It just turns the blue purple. Might be able to save it with the Tambourine, hey? Okay. We'll see what it looks like when it's cured. This opal, right? White opal glitters is what they also call the cheat glitters. Right? So if you see anybody ever talking about, oh, do I want to do this with the glitter on the bottom? We'll see how we go. I don't want any. Don't want any of that blue getting in me Tambourine. Enough, that'll get me by. Yes, white opals are what they call cheat glitter. Now this one has more of a blue shift to it than a lot of them do. A lot of them are very pinky purple, I've found. But if you're looking for a really easy way to get into a wide range of colors without actually spending the money up front on buying 400 glitter colors, get yourself a few cans of the Australian export spray paint that you can get from Super Cheap, and a white opal. Now what will happen is, regardless of what color you spray your base, that is the color that you're going to get in the opal, and then it gives it a real glittery effect as well. So essentially, like if I had done that really nice blue color that we did on the first one, this would look more teal than it does purple. It shows up the color from underneath, and that is a really, well, that's why they call it cheat glitter. It's a cheat way of getting a variety of looks by using the one glitter. So if you are starting out and you're looking for what glitters to get, and you're looking to start your collection, make sure a white opal glitter is in that first lot of your collection, which is why I wanted to use this tonight so I could show you. But that is all on there now. I've given it a tap. So because there is such a little amount of epoxy on here now, I can stand that up on my drying rack, which I'll show you in 1 second if I can get it to go high enough. See my drying rack? Right, so that won't drip down now. You just have to make sure that you that's why you put such a little amount. you don't want it enough that gravity is going to take over and pull that epoxy down. But otherwise, that is the hang method. So, any questions before we move on to final coats? Okay, so to get to, good Lord, look at it everywhere. To get to this next point, this is the part where you will need your turner. I'm going to move that onto the film. I use the hang method for this. This is a stemless glass. Got a little bit that's sticking up there. This is a stemless glass. I personally don't like going all the way to the rims. I don't like the thought of them putting their lips straight onto epoxy. With tumblers it's a little bit different because they've got the slide lids, right? So you can, I mean, I know they're still putting their lips onto the tumbler, but it's, I don't know, to me it's just not, I don't like it. So I do use 25mm painter's tape, and I tape off the top of all of my glasses, which you will see I've also done here. Okay, so I used hang method for this one. I've made sure it is completely cured. I did it a couple of days ago to make sure it was completely cured. I'm just going to go through now and kind of pat it down because I can see a few bits on camera that are sticking up. But I used a chunky mix for this so that you could see that once it was patted down, see how it's not really sticking up that much. I shouldn't have very many problems, if any. Once the final coat, well, the first coat. With this one, it's getting a coat of epoxy, then I'm doing my decals, and then it's going to get a final coat. But because we're only covering glittering tonight and not decals or anything like that, we're going to pretend that this is a final coat. But we can still use it. Spin that on real quickly because I want to show you what it should look like. Okay, so you want your turner, make sure that your turner is level, right? If you have what you just saw there where it was turning and it was clunking and it was uneven, your coat of epoxy is gonna look horrible. Hi Donna, yes, sorry, just catching, I just saw your comment. Yes, both of them will be on the page. What I think I might do though is edit them and join them all into one, and then have them as one long video on the page as well, just so people don't have to go flicking around too much. I'll still leave the 2 live ones up just so people can look back on comments, but I'm going to join the 2 of them together to make one full one, just so people don't have to switch and jump around. What else did I miss while I was crapping on? I bought a kit off Bridget that arrived last week. Donna, I have never used Bridget's ones, but from what I believe, hers were based off of the originals that were designed by Chelsea Blue Designs anyway, so it's much of a muchness. Were micas on the list? Oh yes, they were. That was the 4th one. Thank you, Anna. We're going to do, for the beginner's guide, the 4th tutorial is ink swirls. Micas, I have micas planned for part of another series on mediums, but the ink swirls, because they're an easy method, I thought that and glittering would be a good way to get started. How long can the resin sit in the cup before it starts to set? This is EX74 and I'm already starting to push my luck. I think the work time is around 45 minutes. In a perfect world where all of my lives are super professional and nothing ever goes wrong, I would have had plenty of time, but I am starting to push my luck. Not super, like I'm not overly worried yet, I'm not in a panic yet, but maybe in another 15-20 minutes we might start running into problems. And I've got purple spray paint on my arm. Okay, so as I mentioned, safety first. You want to get your first coat of epoxy. I should stop calling it a final coat. your first coat of epoxy is going to be a lot thicker than what you use in a hang method if you did it the hang method way. This Gwendolyn, this glitter is actually from America. I'm sorry. The two that we used previously in the live, which is these two, this way. These are both from Sparkles by Carbee. Tambourine, I think, is available already. Hyam's Beach was in the Summer Bonanza box, so that should be listed, I don't know, maybe in the new year. But this one in particular is from an American company that I used to, I don't want to say work for because I didn't, but I did weekly lives for her for like 18 months. So one of the stipulations of doing that for her was that I had to use her products. So a lot of my glitters are from America, but I am starting to get a good Australian based collection going now too. But yeah, as far as work times, depending on the resin, you'll just have to read the manufacturer's instructions, and they'll tell you what the work time, the part cure time, which is like touch cure, and what the full cure times are. So make sure you always read the directions and the instructions on your resin that you're using. Do you sand it and let the resin live? It really depends on whether I need to sand or not. If it's all nice and smooth, honestly, no, I don't. If it's not smooth, then I do. But really, I'm just trying to create a nice smooth base for when my vinyl goes on, because I don't want to see all the lumps under my vinyl when I apply it. So I'm just working the resin around. Now this turner does move a lot quicker than the rotisserie ones, so please don't panic with the speed at which this is turning. This is why I kind of wanted to use one of the turner bases, because I know a lot of beginners will probably opt for getting like the rotisserie kits and a turner base kit. This moves at double the speed of what a rotisserie motor moves at. They do the same job. Okay. Not sure if you can see on camera. I've only got, oh, there's a bare spot. I've got all of my epoxy on there now, just about, except for this bald spot that's coming up. Right, and once I make sure that it's all, there you go, there's a bit that's going to need sanding, that's sticking up. You'll be able to see, depending on the lighting that you have, you'll be able to see where you're missing epoxy when you're putting it on this thick. Like, it does have a really nice glassy shine to it. But again, as you're working the epoxy around the cup, you're going to feel that glide in places that have epoxy, and not so much of a glide in places that need it. Don't forget my butt. It seems to only ever be on lives that I forget to do the bottom of a cup, but I've been pretty good lately. So again, now that it's all on the bottom, I'm going to move it up from the bottom onto the cup. And then from there, I'm going to make sure, epoxy loves to run away from rims. So just make sure that you've got that in completely covered. And while you're applying, it's okay to push from top to bottom. But just before you want to let it start to spin on its own, you always want to move your resin back up to the top. Okay. Now this is self-leveling epoxy, right? So even if you push it up to the top and it's got like a big lump at the top, it's going to work its way down so it evens out anyway. But pushing the epoxy up to the top just ensures that you don't have any trouble with it moving away from the rims. Okay. So once that's all on, I'm going to let it spin for 5 minutes. Once it's spun for 5 minutes, I will use my heat gun just to give it a little quick burst just to kill any bubbles that might be in there. Now, when people say heat gun, you have a few options. You can use a hairdryer. Hairdryers take a little bit longer to have the same effect, but they are definitely effective. Some people use the blow torches that you see, like the little gas blow torches. Some people use embossing guns, like the heat embossing guns. Personally, I nicked my old man's heat gun that's like powerful enough to melt paint off the wall. So I only ever need like a little zzz and it's done, because too much actually makes it so thin that I lose most of my epoxy onto my drop sheet, because it just makes it too thin. So it really depends on what you're using, but you'll be able to see as you're working the heat on it, you'll be able to see. If you've got heaps of micro bubbles, you'll be able to see all of them popping, but otherwise you'll just see that it gets a really nice glassy smooth finish to it, and that's when you know that it's enough, because it's all leveled out, it's all moved around like it needs to, and you're good to go. So EX74, in summer this will probably be right to turn off from turning in about 4 hours. Because of the time, I'm going to just let it spin overnight. But EX74 takes a full 3 days to fully cure. So once this is touch dry, if I need to, like in the morning, if I need to, I can give it a sand and I can put another coat on it. But this can't go to the customer. If this is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I wouldn't even think about giving it to a customer until Saturday, right? Once you have finished everything on it and you don't want to touch it anymore, right, you need the full cure time from there. So with EX74 it is 72 hours, but as I mentioned before, always read your manufacturer's instructions for the resin that you are using. A lot of resins have different cure times, different work times, which is like when it's in the pot when you're using it, how long that you've got before it starts to cure and get gluggy, which is really good for when you want to do drip cups, but not so good for when you want to do stuff like this. So once that's finished curing, it will be ready to go. Now, I'm going to quickly catch up on any comments. Angela, I can definitely do a final coach troubleshooting. I can include that in the tips and tricks one. Did you mix the resin with the hardener? Yes, I did. Okay, so I already had... This is part A. I already had part A, 10 mils of part A in my little container, right? Then on the live, I added in 10 mils of part B, which is the hardener, right? 1:1 ratio, the 10 mils of each made the 20 mils that you saw me use on screen. And a little bit of that we used for the hang method, but not much. So with this chunky glitter, I'm going to say it took a whole 20 mils to get this nice thin coat. There is, you'll see it, it sticks up. There's just one piece of really annoying, stubborn glitter, unless it's no, it's right here. It just went past. There is one little bit that's sticking up. So I'm going to have to sand that down a little bit before I continue. But otherwise, it's good to go. Yes, Joanne, in regards to climate, you will learn that if you're starting to do tumblers in spring, summer, it's a lot easier, well, I found it's a lot easier to work in spring and autumn than it is in summer and winter. Now, I'm on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, so I'm about halfway between Sydney and Brisbane, and I find in winter, it's a real pain in the butt to work with epoxy because it's just so incredibly gluggy that you need a warmer. And then in summer, because it's so thin and it starts to cure so quickly because it's so hot, you have to work a lot faster. So do take into account your climate when you're working with resin. You will find some time of the year you prefer over other times. But yeah, I find it a lot easier. Tumbler making is a lot easier in autumn and spring when the weather's around, you know, like 25 degrees. Crystal, I answered your question ages ago, but you were late. I made my first glass with Mod Podge at the beginning of October 2018 for my 30th birthday. I didn't want to pay somebody else to make my glass. I wanted it done my way. And that was done before I had a silhouette machine or anything. I actually printed out a picture that said happy 30th birthday, and I printed it out onto paper, and then I used the old decoupage method with, you know, like what you used to do for soaps for Mother's Day, where you used to put the pictures of the wrapping paper. Same idea, but I decoupaged my printer paper image onto my glitter glass, and that was the first thing that I ever made. And then I made a few for friends and stuff like that. By Christmas 2018 I had my first turner and everything, and then it was the week between Christmas and New Year of 2019 that my first resin order arrived, and so it was around New Year's 2019 New Year's that I started making resin tumblers. It's been almost 2 years now. What grit sandpaper for between coats with chunky, please? I use a 600. I think it's a 600 wet and dry, like a fine one. The only time that I use, where did it go? I'm pretty sure this is 220, but I will double check. But the only time I use that one is when I'm doing the sanding on like the actual stainless steel itself. Otherwise, it's a 600 grit wet and dry. Like, it's not super fine, but it's not super chunky that it's going to leave heaps of scratch marks either. Thank you so much for tonight. You are so welcome. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly add, the live has finished, so I'm just going to quickly record this because I hit end live and started cleaning up my workspace and realized that we never covered spray adhesive or spray paint. So I apologize to everybody that did see me live. Unless you watch this on YouTube, you're not going to hear this, but I'm going to include it anyway. Spray adhesive and spray paint works pretty much exactly the same way with the application method where you see me sprinkling it on, but with spray adhesive, you would prep your cup, spray paint the base if you wanted to, then you'd apply the spray adhesive, and then while that spray adhesive was still tacky or wet, you would go ahead and apply your glitter exactly the same way that we did tonight. With spray paint, exactly the same, except it's not an adhesive. So what you need to do is spray paint your cup while that spray paint is still wet is when you do your glittering. Okay? So spray adhesive and spray paint are also two methods that you can use to glitter your tumblers. Mod Podge and the hang method are probably the easiest out of the four. Spray painting, as you saw on my drink bottle from the live, even somebody that's been doing this as long as I have, when in a rush it can go to pieces. So I would recommend doing the Mod Podge or the hang method when you are first starting out, just because you can, instead of, you know, needing to rush your paint job because you're worrying about it drying before you get to glitter, you can really take your time to create that really nice smooth base with your spray paint. Okay, but yeah, as long as you make sure that your spray adhesive or your spray paint is still wet when you are doing your glitter application, you put the glitter on exactly the same way that you saw us do tonight with the tapper. Okay, and then you are ready to proceed as we did in the live. But I thought I'd just include that little quick bit because I did promise that I would verbally mention the two of them and then completely forgot, because my head was all over the place because of the bit of the muck up that we had. So then I was just in a flurry from there. So I do apologize, but they're the other two ways that you can do it, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of your night. Bye guys.